It's one thing that we always try to keep honest here on the Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820 with Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, the marvelous one, Dan Marver, and myself, Mike Mercado. While we're going to have fun talking about sports, we have to also talk about the important stuff that affects all of us. And I think this story about Matt Harvey that came out a few days ago up in the case of Tyler Skaggs and his death really fascinated me. And it also really saddened me because this is a problem that you're seeing all over our country. And it is something that is scary because I think all of us are affected by it one way or another. And I'll just read a little bit. This is from an article I got from Scott Pulasic, and this has to deal with the story that TJ Quinn reported on ESPN. Matt Harvey, who was teammates with former Los Angeles Angels pitchers Tyler Skaggs in 2019, provided testimony on Tuesday for the U.S. versus Eric K case. ESPN's TJ Quinn reported Harvey said he used drugs in the dugout and team clubhouse. Harvey said he previously used cocaine and oxycodone and added players frequently use oxycodone and Tylenol. Prosecutors in this case are attempting to argue that K, who is the former Angels communications director on trial for Skaggs' death, provided the pitcher with the drugs in his system when he died in 2019. Harvey said he provided Skaggs with Percocet in the clubhouse at times, but that the pitcher otherwise received drugs from K. I highly suggest you guys read more about this article and more about this entire case. And I'm going to throw it to the host of the Baseball Weekend Journal, one of our baseball experts. The marvelous one does a great job as our historian. And when it comes to covering the sport day to day, Paulie does it best than anybody in our city. And Paulie, the tragedy that happened in 2019 when we heard of the death, and now seeing the ramifications and this Matt Harvey story. I mean, this is something that we thought only happened in the 70s, and we know drug use in sports is a thing. But when you heard this story, I mean, your initial thoughts?
Well, this is a lot different than the amphetamine usage of the 70s. I mean, it's quite the opposite with fentanyl and Oxycontin being, morphine or opium derivative products. I mean, it opens up a whole conversation of why were these guys doing it to begin with? But I don't know if you guys realize this. Just literally right before we started recording, Eric K was found guilty on those charges of supplying drugs to Tyler Skaggs, and I think the wrongful death. I don't remember what the two charges were, but he's basically found by a jury of his peers to be responsible. And it opens up the question though of why were Eric K and Tyler Skaggs doing these types of drugs, and it makes you wonder if it's in the case of Skaggs being an active pitcher, if it was more than just an addiction to a pain reliever, if he was actually trying to use it as a pain reliever or a mood enhancer of some sort, a recreational type of thing. And I mean, unfortunately, I would like to think that the team would be able to do something about it to prevent these things from happening, but as drug addict behavior would suggest, that they're going to find a way to do it without the team knowing about it. And unfortunately, this happened to be a member in the organization of the team that was helping Skaggs obtain those drugs. I mean, it did kind of open the doors up on other guys. I think CJ Crone was named, another pitcher, Blake Parker was named, Matt Harvey, of course, what we found out with him, who actually was known to have used cocaine in New York when he was with the Mets. It really opens up, why are these guys in a position where they feel the need to use these types of things, whether it's physical or emotional, and two, how do their teams help them from, recovering from that sort of thing? So I mean, I can't imagine that this is an isolated case of drug abuse in Major League Baseball right now. I just hope that it prevents more people from dying or more people from supplying deadly drugs to their players.
Paulie, you could check out all his work throughout the weekend, all the week that was in baseball at the Baseball Weekend Journal. You guys, it's a great companion piece to the Sports Cubicle. Before I move to the marvelous one, Dan Marver, himself, who is a father, Paulie, a has a young child, has raised a bunch of boys. I want to hear from their thoughts when they see young men do things like this. And then obviously Devin, growing up in this era of opioids, along with myself, there's so many things personable to it. But just to give us a quick update, the jury in the case against former Los Angeles Angels communication director Eric Kay has found him guilty of distributing fentanyl and causing the death of former pitcher Tyler Skaggs in 2019. The jury, which began deliberations Thursday morning, wasted little time in reaching its conclusion. The 10-woman, 2-man jury needed just 3 hours to arrive at its verdict. Kay was immediately taken into custody while his family sat in silence as the verdict was read. Marvelous One, you hear this story and you see the sadness of so much potential being wasted because of drugs like this, such hard drugs, and then seeing what Matt Harvey must be dealing with, the pressures or whatever the mental state he must be in, and a lot of these players must be in to be taking these drugs in the clubhouse. Your thoughts when you hear the story?
What's worse than using drugs yourself is supplying drugs to other people. That is actually exponentially worse. Now, in terms of, I don't know, maybe, even there was a story. I actually, in college, freshman year in the dorm, back in the day when it wasn't legal, we were using marijuana. So I call home, ask my dad, I say, Dad, they're using marijuana. Do you think I should do that? That's the kind of thing. And my son would do the same. And my son would do the same thing. It's insane. So there was no risk for me, no risk for him. So I don't know what it is. Maybe we're just weird that we don't want to get high or something. It's just bizarre. I don't know. I guess the thrill of it, and then you go too far, and then you're dead. It's crazy. It's out of my consciousness. See, that's the problem. So I can't even speak to why this would happen. But distributing is exponentially worse than using, actually, because maybe you're going to kill a half dozen people instead of just yourself.
That's a great point, Marvelous One, that you bring up, and it's one of the big conversations that we have here on WCPT Monday through Friday. Our amazing hosts do a great job of spotlighting when things get crazy, especially from pharmaceutical companies and from malfeasance that happens of overprescribing people and making it so easy and dependent for these drugs. And Dev, you and I, roughly the same age. I'm a little older than you, and we grew up with this pandemic, this epidemic of opioids. You hear this story. Your thoughts?
Well, first thing when I see Matt Harvey trending, when there's no baseball, I'm like, is he renouncing his retirement? Only to find out it's a huge bombshell like this. It's like, whoa. Unexpected, because again, I was I think a freshman in college, really watching Matt Harvey on the Mets, being like, man, I really like this guy. So it's always fun to see your heroes get crushed a little bit, but it's been a reoccurring problem here, and I hate to say it like in such a casual tone that we've seen this in everything here, but the thing about especially with just drug use, it's usually people who become bored is kind of the big factor here. And with some of these baseball teams, they got to get to stadiums up to 2 to 3 hours before the game starts, and they just got to sit there. And I got a buddy of mine, he used to play in a band, Stabbing Westward, and he said, if you get to some of these venues with hours to kill, you can't go anywhere. You got a lot of time to kill. It's very easy to fall into something that's going to help you pass the time or feel better. So definitely if they're finding, and once you get addicted on drugs, you're hooked. So of course they're going to be doing coke in the dugout as long as they don't get caught. That's the biggest thing here. But then, one thing led to another. A man's dead now here. And, it's sad that it happened, but at the end of the day, these guys got to face their consequences for their actions here. So I'm glad the jury found them guilty. And the thing that kind of ticks me off more here is the MLB. Oh, we can't have people doing steroids. We got a drug test. How the hell did you not find opioids in his, I can't say the word I want to say, the P test, How the hell did you not test for any of these drugs? If it's not a PED or a steroid, get the hell out of here. Come on. Something needs to be done here.
Yeah, it's an upsetting story, and it's something that we'll keep our eyes on. And obviously, as things break,
here, guys, listen to this. At the bank, I get a urine test before they hire me, so it's crazy.
Yeah, there's plenty of jobs, and again, we're talking about such dangerous drugs. This isn't, Marvelous One told us that very funny and cute story about him and his son about marijuana and how far we've come in that conversation. But what we're talking about here is these body relaxers, these muscle relaxers, these opioids that stop hearts, that completely stop you from breathing, that just little drops, just little pills, little dust of it, kills police officers, and people OD on it all the time. And it is sad to see that it is such a ravishing disease in our country. And if this story can open the eyes like the Len Bias story did with cocaine in the 80s, or any other type of situation where somebody makes the right decision now or doesn't go down this road. I hope that is Skaggs' ultimate, legacy when it comes to this, but it's something we'll be covering here on the Sports Cubicle. More news breaks, and of course Paulie will be covering Major League Baseball from the lockout to the Cubs, the White Sox, and any story just like this. We got more coming up next year on the Sports Cubicle. It's Paul Chivari, it's Devin Tingle, it's the marvelous one Dan Marver. I'm Mike Mercado.